All right, let's talk about the Miami Dolphins, who had a weird year, and have had a couple of weird years in a row now, but especially last season. The preseason hype was high. I believe I predicted them to make it to the Super Bowl. I know I did. I'm saying I believe I did. No, I did. I predicted them to make it to the Super Bowl. I was high on them. It started off great. They looked awesome to start the year. Had that game where they put up 70 against Denver. And then kind of the last quarter of the season and the playoffs happened where they really struggled against Kansas City. A lot of teams struggled against Kansas City, but still they struggled even more so than the other teams did. What do they do from here? Where do they go, and how do they get better at this point? Because the goal isn't to make the playoffs. That was the goal a few years ago. Now the goal is to try and compete for a Super Bowl. How do they make sure that this most recent season doesn't happen again, where the hype gets out of hand, but then they don't pull anything off? Well, first, let's look at the resources that they have, cap space and cash. Not a lot going on here. I mean, only $44 million in cash, negative $24 million in cap space. So they don't have a ton of money to work with. Now, can they clear up some money? Yeah, they can clear up a little. Just a few players to look at, like Jerome Baker, David Long Jr., Mike White. The number next to their name is how many millions it would clear up in cap space, in cap space. So there's, some ways to maybe negotiate, get a little bit more money that way. But usually the way you clear up cap space is through restructures, the kind of thing where you go to a player and say, hey, we'll give you X amount of money in a signing bonus. We'll restructure your deal so it's in a signing bonus, which means they get their money right now, and then you can sort of have that signing bonus count against the cap in future years. That's how that works. That might be what they have to do, as they are running a little bit tight on cash, and when it comes to free agents, it's not like they don't have anyone. You look at their list of free agents and there's some real players here that they're going to have to pay attention to. I mean, the top two, Christian Wilkins and Robert Hunt. Let's talk with Christian Wilkins for a second, who I think is just a star player in this league and not someone you want to let go. I think they're going to try and find a way to keep him. I think they're going to do what they can to, they'll restructure, they'll kick the can down the road. I think when you're trying to compete, you don't let him walk out the door. I didn't think he had his best year last year, but he's still really good. I don't see a scenario where you're getting rid of him. Robert Hunt's interesting at the guard position, who, I remember I was higher on than the average public was a few years ago, and I was kind of proven right. He ended up having a couple of good years recently, although did only have around 600 snaps last season, but still. I do wonder, though, is there a bit of a concern of are you going for, I mean, if it's $18 million, that's a lot of money to spend on him. That might be, but again, you don't want to let the offensive line get it to be a disaster. So what do? It's interesting. That's a tough one. And Connor Williams, who's another guy I like at the center position, PFF loves. PFF grades him super high. I don't know if he's quite that good, but I think he's really good. So definitely not someone you want to let go. I think if he's getting $8 million, try to find a way to make that work. And Andrew Van Ginkel, who had a really interesting season last year, he ended up, again, another guy, one of those guys PFF loves, got a lot of pressures, a really high advanced stats last year. So he's someone you pay attention to if you're Miami. You probably try and keep him in the building again for $7 million. I think that's what you want to do. Raekwon Davis, someone who I think your mileage may vary on him, but again, if you let him walk, you have to replace him. Same thing with Deshaun Elliott. If you let him walk, you have to replace him, and that's the case with the other guys as well. Wilson, Jones, they're solid role players who, if you let walk, you have to replace. So there's that, and there's the other aspect here with Miami, which is the Tua conversation. So, Tua, if you haven't heard, is the quarterback of the Miami Dolphins. I know, crazy. Tua is someone who, obviously, there's a lot of disagreement about how good of a quarterback he really is. I think it's kind of hard to... He's never really been in a great, easy to evaluate situation, because he was either in an awful situation when he first started, or he was in an amazing situation once Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle got here. So it's sort of been tough to figure out exactly how much of Tua being good is the situation around him and how much of it is just him. I think Tua's good. I think he's a good quarterback. I think the situation around him helps. I think that's kind of how I view it. The question is, if Tua wants $50 million a year, what do you do? And Tua's going to point and say, listen, I've been an MVP candidate in this league. I am someone who can, do a lot of really good things. I can put up these incredible numbers. And for the Miami Dolphins, it's easy to sit here and say, like, well, if you're not getting a Patrick Mahomes, paying him $50 million might not be a good idea. At the same time, though, if you let him walk, what do you do? If you're trying to compete for a Super Bowl, you're just in that weird situation. And also, it is worth mentioning with Tua, he does have some injury issues. It's true, he does. And it didn't go well against Kansas City. Like, the cold did seem to affect him. And I know it's an annoying narrative, but, like, sometimes annoying narratives are true. And so, for Tua, they can give him a contract now. That's just something you can do. He currently has his 5th-year option this upcoming year. You don't have to give him a contract now because of the franchise tag, right? The threat of the franchise tag means you can let him play his 5th season, and then you can still give him a big contract. He'll still want to take the contract now instead of having to play a year on the franchise tag. So you still have that leverage if you decide to wait. I think that's probably what you do, right? You probably just wait another year, not because you don't think he's good or anything, but just like it feels like, why not get that one added year of information before you do it? If Tua ends up proving, like, if he wins MVP and wins the Super Bowl and like plays great in cold weather, well, then awesome, then you pay him the money because he's worth it, right? So like, there's no real harm, I think, in waiting a year. I think the harm in waiting a year is, does Tua want to sign it next year? But I think he still would. I don't think that's a real concern. So I'd probably give it a year before paying him. That's how I view it. Finally, last chart, again, just to kind of recap everything we went over. Cap space, negative $24 million. Cash, $44 million. The cost to re-sign everyone is $69 million. And money that could be free is about $19 million. So again, what's important is that cash number, right? Which is all projected, and teams do spend over what their cash projection is all the time. So who knows, right? But if it's true that you maybe don't have enough cash to re-sign everybody, well, then there's nothing you can do. Then there's no spending down the road. That's the money you have to spend on players. Owners aren't just going to give you unlimited money to go out and sign players, right? So because of that, you might have to make some tough decisions. I don't think they want to let Christian Wilkins go. To me, that's kind of the one. I look at this, if I'm a Miami fan, and I'm saying Wilkins has to stay. I don't think there's anyone else on the free agent thing that has to stay. I think Wilkins has to stay. So they got to figure out a way to keep him in the building. And then you just hope you can build a team around him, around everyone else the way you want to. There's the other factor, which is you got to get better too, right? All this stuff is, how do you not get worse? You have to get better because you weren't good enough this year. I kind of think they need a third receiver. I know people talk about Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle being so awesome, but they haven't done a great job with wide receiver depth. I feel like these past couple of years, and a lot of people will tell you, there's the old expression of you're only as good as your third best receiver, because you can double team 2 guys. You can't double team 3 guys unless you only rush 3. So if you can get an extra guy that can really win, I think that could do a lot for this roster. That's something maybe I would look to that might not be that expensive, but might actually unlock something really key in the offense. Maybe that's something you even do through the draft. It's an option. So that's something I pay attention to. I'm interested in getting rid of Xavier Howard and kind of trying to see what you can do defensively. Getting rid of Vic Fangio, usually not a great move, but it might work out because it wasn't great last year. So I don't know. Interesting stuff and I think that was a mutually parted ways, not a firing, but still, interesting stuff by Miami. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.